Welcome, everyone, to this special podcast episode from Bull Take Scouting, where we're going to go over the top 6 quarterback prospects in the 2021 NFL draft class. With the championship game having ended last night, because we're recording this on Tuesday right now, we're full steam ahead into the draft process. And, well, we're going to first, I'd like to say how we scouted all these quarterbacks separately, as we always do, and we just ended up having very similar rankings. So atop our quarterback rankings for both of us is Trevor Lawrence. Alex, would you like to say a word on Lawrence and how you think he projects to the NFL?
Well, so first of all, I think it's pretty, well thought that Lawrence is the best quarterback in this draft. There's a few small people out there that say, Wilson above Lawrence, whatever, but no, Lawrence is the best quarterback in this draft. I don't think it's miles ahead of the other two in Fields and Wilson, but he is the best quarterback in this draft. I think his best asset is definitely his mind, his football IQ. He's always finding that open man, and he progresses through his reads really well. His accuracy, it's really great. And I know you push back on his his ability to lead the team a little bit and maybe bring the team to and will them to win, but I don't see that. I just think it's a different confidence that he has and that he instills in his team. And it's just all around. I just see great things from Trevor Lawrence, and I could go on and on talking about all the good things that I see, but I think by this point you've already heard all of the good things that he does. I think some of the things that he can improve on, I don't think he's a perfect prospect. I think, his pocket awareness sometimes can improve a little bit. I think, sometimes there'll be a pass rusher that, he doesn't feel, but it's not all the time, just occasionally, and he makes the occasional just bad throw. And I think he's just trying to do more than he can because he has that confidence in himself that he can be Superman sometimes, I think. And there's an occasionally no one can fit that ball through that window. Don't make that throw. But that's basically just simply the coach at the NFL level saying, hey, Trevor, don't throw that ball. No one can make that throw. And I think at college, they allow him to freelance a little bit. They just say, you know what? You're the best player on the field. Kind of do what you want. We're not going to tell you anything you do is wrong.
Yeah, I think you really said a lot of what everyone really loves about Trevor. I think that he's a highly accurate quarterback. The intangibles are really the big plus with him. He's mentally, he's almost as good as it gets coming out of college. He's going through his progressions, making the right read, seeing what the coverage is giving him, and reading the defense well, and getting the ball to where it needs to be. And he also is one thing that I know that you're very high on, just as I am, and you didn't really mention here, is that he's way more dynamic a runner than people actually really talk about very often. Because when I turned on the tape, obviously there's always been a lot of chatter for several years on Trevor Lawrence, but I didn't really hear much about how good of a runner he is. But he really has the ability to break off a 20, 30, 40-yard touchdown run because he's very athletic and his speed is really good. So I think that's going to be a big asset in the NFL. And so when you look at all his traits, he's an extremely well-rounded quarterback. And for me, I thought my biggest knock on him was his deep ball accuracy. I think it's correctable, but right now it's not as good as it could be. Sometimes you do see him missing those deep shots. And I think that I would have wanted to see a little more against Ohio State in terms of willing his team back into that game and putting up a bigger fight. But at the end of the day, his winning record speaks for himself, and he has a very good command of the offense. So I think that Trevor Lawrence is the number one quarterback in this draft. And obviously, as we've all gone over plenty of times, any team would be very lucky to have him, and that team will be the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh, totally. And, I think, like I said before, we could go on and on about Trevor, but I don't think we need to touch on him too much more for this podcast, just because we're going to say things a lot of other people are saying. If you want to see our completely, fully detailed scouting report on him, Be sure to check us out on Instagram, and that's not up yet, but that will be up soon, and we'll make sure to let everyone know when that gets posted. So if you want to see our full, completely detailed analysis on Trevor, check us out on Instagram, and we'll make sure we let you know when that Lawrence post is up.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to the next quarterback in both of our quarterback rankings. It's Justin Fields, the quarterback from Ohio State. I'm a big fan of Justin Fields. I think that in the right situation, if he gets put into a very good situation and Trevor Lawrence is in a little bit worse a situation, he could end up being the better player, at least in terms of how long they stay in those situations. Because a lot with quarterbacks is a lot of the success is predicated by the situation they're put in. And as you said, I don't think the gap is as wide as people say. It definitely still is sizable, but it's not to the point where there's no scenario in which Justin Fields ends up being more successful in the NFL. To me, Fields is just a natural playmaker. He's got great arm talent, puts effortless zip on the ball, drives it downfield with ease. He can even alter his arm angles in order to throw off platform. He's very accurate to all levels of the field. He's got great escapability, throws on the run very well, and he's a really tough, athletic, effective runner. So for me, he's just like he's such a good playmaker. And the issues with Fields are blitz recognition, sensing pressure. Sometimes he'll hold the ball too long, take a bad sack, or he'll freeze up. Sometimes he makes an ill-advised throw in those situations, and I think he could read the field a little better sometimes. But the big point for me is that he improved on those weaknesses in 2020. They resurfaced in the Indiana game, in the Northwestern game, but in the rest of the games, including in the college football playoff on the biggest stage, I didn't really see those issues pop back up. So the improvement he had in this year in terms of those all very correctable mistakes he was making in 2019 really leads me to think that he's going to keep developing into a franchise quarterback at the next level. And really what topped it all off for me in terms of making him the QB2 in this class and being really confident that he's going to be a franchise quarterback was his display of toughness, competitiveness, and heart against Clemson. He came into that game and it was so clear he had one goal, and it was to win that game and outplay the man that he has been said to be number 2 behind his whole career, Trevor Lawrence. And I think that taking that hit that he took and then getting right back in there and winning the game despite being in such clear pain the rest of the way, that just showed me he has all the heart you want. For me, Justin Fields has some issues and he needs to keep correcting, but I think he will, with more experience, correct them, and he's going to be a top-level quarterback in the National Football League.
Yeah, so I completely agree. Fields definitely has, some issues, like you said. His pocket awareness isn't great. It's good, but there are times when he just does not feel the pressure. I think that will come with experience, though. We have to remember he's played less than 25 games. I think 22 or 23 games in his college career. So he's not raw, but he is still new to this level of competition. So I can only think that he's going to get better with feeling the blitz, feeling the pressure in the pocket. Like you said, sometimes his accuracy is off. It's not bad. He has a lot of great ball placement throws. He has really good deep ball accuracy. You could make the argument that it's better than Trevor's. And I think that, like you said, most, if not all of his issues and negatives for me are all fixable with the right coach. So I agree with what you said about there is potential for him to be a better quarterback than Lawrence if both of the situations happen to Fields gets put in the best situation possible, Lawrence gets put in one of the worst situations possible. Obviously, we don't want that. Obviously, we think in the long run, Lawrence is going to be better than Fields. But I just want to point out that Fields and also the next quarterback, Wilson, that we'll talk about, in most other quarterback drafts, they would be the number 1 quarterback in the draft. So this quarterback class at the top is absolutely amazing. So I just want to touch on what you touched on at the end with Fields in the game against Clemson. You really talked about his will to win that game, and he just showed that he wanted it more than all of those Clemson players. And to me, that really was like, wow, okay, this guy is going to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL just because, you can tell he's got great work ethic. He's got great determination, all the intangibles that are sometimes for a lot of quarterbacks really hard to judge just by watching film. You could tell in that game with just how he played, his demeanor, that he was laser focused on that one goal, like you said, to beat out Trevor. And then the second thing to me in that game that really I was like, wow, was his toughness after that hit, like you said. And let's be honest, they haven't told us that he got hurt. They haven't told us, he broke some ribs. This is college football. They don't have to disclose all the injuries. So they can just keep it under wraps like they should. They don't want to come out and say, yeah, he broke ribs. But you look at that hit, there's no way he made it out of that hit without broken ribs. And just the toughness through playing through that injury, you could see every time he was on the ground, it was so hard for him to get back up. You saw him get on the bike after he took that hit. He was in so much pain, literally just getting onto a bike. And he could push through that pain and make the throws and the plays that he did. To me, that's just like second to none. That was completely amazing. And yes, he had some bad throws in that game. He had his interception. That was a bad throw. But I personally don't knock him for that interception at all, and I'll tell you why. To me, it's almost a positive. That interception, yes, it was thrown into triple coverage, but the thing was he had that injury and those broken ribs. If he took another hit, he would have been out of the game, and that's the last thing you want as a quarterback. In a championship, in a playoff game, you cannot leave the game no matter what. So there was pressure in his face. He could not hold on to the ball as long as he wanted to because of that injury, and he had to get rid of that ball. A lot of quarterbacks would say, no, I need to hang on to the ball because no one's open and I don't want to throw a pick. He said, I don't care. I need to get rid of this ball. Yes, he could have thrown it to a different spot, but he didn't have the time for that. He needed to get rid of that ball before he got hit, before his ribs were exposed, and the defensive lineman took a big hit on him and potentially knocked him out for that game and the national championship. So to me, that's great awareness of saying, okay, I have to get rid of this ball because I cannot take a hit because I'll be out of this game and let my team down. So that's why I thought, that throw to me really showed his maturity in saying, okay, I know when I have to get rid of the ball. Like you said, sometimes he holds on to it for too long. That play showed me that he has the ability to say, no, I need to get rid of this ball, and I know when I need to get rid of the ball.
Yeah, I think that I also want to touch on, like, we're putting so much stake into the semifinal game, but we're not really mentioning that he didn't have the best game against Alabama. So I just wanted to explain real quick before we move on to Zach Wilson why I don't really knock him for the Alabama game. First, the injury is still there. He was playing severely injured, and that's going to impact every throw he makes. And next, I don't think there's much he could have done to win that game. People didn't see the same beautiful deep shots that he had against Ohio State, but that's just him being smart because those receivers weren't open. We saw like Chris Olave was really good against Clemson, and then against Alabama, Patrick Surtain almost took him away from the game. And so for me, it's just I think that he was smart, and the noticeable point is that even if he didn't put up great numbers or have a lot of big plays, he didn't make the issues of making poor decisions against pressure or not reading the field well. He didn't put the ball in danger. So he really there isn't anything he could have done to win that game. And I don't think there's anything that was really detrimental to the team. So for me, that game's not a plus or a minus. So I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I agree. And just the last thing before we move on to Zach Wilson, I think you saw him mature as the season went on. He had a poor game against Northwestern. He had a poor game against Indiana. He had a lot of interceptions in those two games, but you saw him make better decisions and not throw the ball into, make bad decisions throwing the ball, not throwing into double coverage all the time. So you could see that maturity over a 2-week span. And to me, that's also really huge. So now I think we can move on to the guy we have really close to Fields. I know in my opinion, it's kind of the mental things that we saw from Fields that has Fields over Zach Wilson as our number 3 quarterback.
Yeah, for me, if you look at tape itself and you look at Zach Wilson's 2020 tape, his tape is better than Justin Fields. Because if you just watching his tape, he had an incredible season. He's extremely accurate, very good ball placement, incredible improvisational ability to extend the play when it breaks down, throwing on the run, very good arm talent. And didn't put the ball in danger. You can't really knock Zach Wilson for anything that he did on the football field in 2020. That's how good his season was. For me, what keeps him behind Fields is the fact that is he a 1 year flash in the pan against lower competition? Because he was not this good before last year. My answer is no, because I still see him as a franchise quarterback in the next level. I don't think you have that year by accident, even against that level of competition. He certainly willed his team above that level of competition, and his team was good, but he definitely made them so much better than they would have been otherwise. But for me, I think what keeps Fields above is, even you said Fields isn't the most experienced, and Zach Wilson being a 3-year starter has more experience. But Fields has experience on the biggest stage against the biggest teams. He's a 2-year Big Ten starter, has played in 2 college football playoffs, 3 games in those 2 years in the playoff. And we simply haven't seen Zach Wilson perform at that level. I do want to say that Coastal Carolina was probably the best team he faced, the best defense, and I thought he performed admirably. He led an incredible 2-minute drill at the end. Well, it was actually less than a minute, I think, but they were 2 yards away from getting into the end zone and completing that comeback drive. So for me, what keeps him behind Fields is just that it's only this 1 year of elite play against a lower level of competition. I still think he's a franchise quarterback, and that's not a huge knock. But the fact that Fields is so much more battle tested and has seen the bigger stage is what keeps Fields ahead of Wilson for me.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said, so I'm not going to really repeat it. The other thing that holds me back a little bit from Wilson is, his size. Fields is 6'3", almost 230, I think, and Wilson is only about, 210. That's what is listed on the website, so probably about 205. So he's a little smaller, and his running ability, although his accuracy is really, really good, and I wouldn't encourage him to run all the time. He can run, and he will run at the next level. And I'm just worried that, if he takes a big hit, that it might, cause him some issues more than that same hit would cause Fields, just because Fields has 25 pounds on him. But like you said, I'm not worried at all about the 1 year show from Wilson, just because that elite accuracy and ball placement and decision making doesn't happen by accident. It's not. You can have maybe 1 or 2 really good games where that happens. That doesn't happen over a full season by accident. He clearly improved from last year. He clearly put a lot of work on in this offseason. So you can't knock his work ethic at all. I know there were some reports that came out about he's snobby, stuck up, whatever. I don't take that into account. That was seemed like one report. Other reports came out saying that wasn't true, that his teammates really like him. So I'm not taking that into account. I think after the combine, if things come out about interviews or whatever, then we can take it into account a little bit. But right now, I give him a pass on that. I think I'm going to trust the reports to say his teammates like him, because they've clearly played hard for him. And you touched on the Coastal Carolina game. He also played really well in his bowl game. It was against UCF, so it wasn't by no means an all-star team or whatever, but it still was a bowl game. That was probably his biggest stage, and he played really well. If you go watch that game, he was dropping dimes. He's another quarterback. He has a great arm. And he was dropping dimes 40 yards down the field. You could see his ball placement on all 3 levels, short, intermediate, and long, were great. And like you said, his pure tape is better than Fields, but the situations that Fields has been put into and how he has performed in those situations is what makes both of us put him over Wilson a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And if people aren't familiar with your reference to the report on character issues, there was a report that came out on walterfootball.com where their reporter Charlie Campbell spoke with team sources across the NFL and found that there was talk of Wilson being a kind of a rich, arrogant, bratty kid who feels like he's entitled. But it also said that he's teammates want to play for him and they rally around him. And there has been really nothing bad from him out of that. We do know there's plenty of reports that he's got a tremendous work ethic. He puts in so much in terms of preparation before each game. So as long as that report really doesn't have much to it, I'm not really worried. And it's really doesn't. That's not something I'm knocking on him now. It just means that I'm really I'm keeping my ears open to see if anything else comes out in the rest of the process. And we'll definitely have to be careful also that there isn't more smoke that comes out. But I think we've really talked everything we need about Zach Wilson. He's both of our quarterback number 3. And as you said, that's a testament to how good this class is, because that's 3 players who we see as basically surefire franchise quarterbacks. And that's incredible to have at the top of the class. And the 4th quarterback has pretty high potential too. So I'll let you kick it off with Trey Lance.
Yeah, so like you said, our 4th quarterback is Trey Lance from North Dakota State. Just a little background. Lance, he was a 1-year starter at North Dakota State. He went undefeated, won the FCS National Championship, 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And then, due to COVID, North Dakota State didn't have a season. They played 1 game, and I don't put much stock into that game at all. It's so hard to be ready to play a 1-game season pretty much. And it was just kind of to try to showcase Lance. But, I think he would have been better off just not having that game. I think it's hard to get all the players around him all ready to play 1 game. You say, okay, we're going to put in all this practice and we're going to play 1 game. I think a lot of players just wouldn't be there because it doesn't benefit them. Obviously, they want to play for their quarterback, but at the same time, that's just really hard to do. But down to Lance as a player, he's a great runner. He's a powerful, strong guy. He'll break tackles. I think between his running ability and his arm strength, which is probably the best in the class, those are his biggest strengths, his running ability and his arm strength. And then you get to a lot of weaknesses with Lance that deal with his mechanics and his footwork that lead to a lot of inaccurate passes. I notice when he releases the ball, a lot of the times it's on a downward trajectory. Sometimes that's making his receivers drop to the ground, come back to the ball when they don't have to. But I think a lot of those can be coached out of him with the right coach. I think a lot of those, weaknesses are coming from not having anywhere close to an NFL level head coach, NFL level offensive coordinator, NFL level quarterback coach at North Dakota State. I'm not trying to knock the coaches there, but they're not at the level of what Lawrence has at Clemson or Fields has at Ohio State. So, a lot of those things are going to be ignored, especially when, they don't need to be fixed in order for North Dakota State to win, because his talent is so much higher than everyone else on the field at the FCS level.
Yeah, I think the word to describe Lance is dynamic. He's as you said, he's an elite runner with the athleticism, the toughness, the size. That's gonna have to be corralled a little bit. You don't want him taking the hits that he took in college, so he's gonna have to learn to slide. But he's definitely still gonna be picking up chunks after chunk. And I think that he's got a great arm. And the important thing for me is that even though he's got some footwork issues, which leads to inconsistent ball placement sometimes, and sometimes he throws the ball a little low, or he is a developmental prospect. I think that as a 1-year FCS starter, he's going to have to sit a full year in the NFL and develop. But the thing is, what really contrasts him with other developmental prospects is that he really takes care of the ball. And usually you see these guys with all the raw physical tools and they're gunslingers and they put the ball in danger. That's not the case with Lance. He had 0 interceptions last year. I know he had 1 or 2 against Central Arkansas, but at the end of the day, he is clean with the football, and you're going to be able to afford the patience for him to grow into the NFL when he's not turning the ball over. Usually when a quarterback gets pulled and you can't keep them on the field to develop them, it's because they are turning the ball over, and that won't be the case for Trey Lance. I do think he needs to be put in the right situation where he can sit that full year to develop. But looking at his draft range, I think there are several teams that could offer that situation. Carolina, where he could sit a year behind Teddy Bridgewater, and Bridgewater is the type of quarterback where he's definitely not going to be playing bad enough for everyone to be screaming for Lance to come in. So he will be able to sit that full year. I'm also thinking of San Francisco, and with Kyle Shanahan's coaching and his offensive scheme, which is very run heavy, I think that he would be incredible in that situation. So he needs to fall into the right situation, but I'm confident he will. And if he does, and if he can sit a full year to develop, he's got a long way to go, and he's a real work in progress. But he has such a high ceiling, and I think he could, when it's all said and done, get to the level of the first three quarterbacks. It's just obviously we have him noticeably lower in our rankings because he's nowhere near the polished product that the first three are, and he will need a full year to sit and a lot of proper development and coaching.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I want to touch on for him is I hate knocking players for the level of competition they played against, but you have to. He's not playing against anywhere close to NFL level speed defenses. He's not playing against, the complexity of NFL defenses. So besides, fixing up his technique, his footwork, his mechanics, you're also going to have to work with him mentally to, I'm not saying that he can't process as quickly as he would have to at the NFL level, but we don't know if he can. So, you're going to have to work through that and say, he's probably playing, simple cover two defenses where he says, okay, there's two high safeties, it's cover two, or there's one high safety, all the guys are impressed, it's man coverage. And then, at the FBS level, it's going to be more complex, and then at the NFL level is the level of the most complexity. And I just think, that year is really what he needs in order to fix, his mechanical issues, his footwork problems, and also for him to be able to mentally get to speed with the NFL.
I think you're totally right. There's definitely that mental jump is going to be just as big as in terms of mechanics and all that. And to move on to our next quarterback, I know he's your number 5 right now. I have him as my number 6, right behind Kyle Trask. But this quarterback is Mac Jones. We saw him win the national championship game last night, and he had a tremendous season. I hate to bring it all down, but I'm not a Mac Jones fan. I know you're not either, so I'm not going to beat around the bush. For me, I think that he really benefited so much with his supporting cast. I think that they bailed him out on some inconsistent ball placement a lot. He only had one fumble, and this was in the championship game the whole season. But I saw him so often throwing while getting hit, and if he does that in the NFL, he's going to be way more of a fumble issue. I saw that he lacked pass rush awareness sometimes, and that ties into throwing while getting hit. He's not going to be able. The big adjustment, his receivers won't always be open in the NFL. Like at Alabama, so often he is throwing up to wide open guys, and if he's not, he's able to blindly trust that the wide receiver will get open. And so I think that's going to be a severe adjustment in the NFL, especially because he's also a 1-year starter, so that's even more of an adjustment already. And at the end of the day, he doesn't have the elite physical traits to make all of this risk worth it. For me, he has mediocre physical traits, and he really benefited from his supporting cast. I don't see a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think he's a high-end backup spot starter who you want in your organization in that role because he's great preparation, great work ethic, great kid from everything we hear. And if he has to come in, he'll get the ball to where it needs to be. But he won't do anything more than that. I don't think he ever had to will Alabama to a win this year. And the last thing I want to touch on is we're seeing Tua Tagovailoa, who's a much more physically gifted, twitchy quarterback, not have a harsh adjustment to the NFL because the level of the supporting cast is just not at all the same. At Alabama, the wide receivers are wide open a lot of the time. And if Tua, with the superior physical traits, is having a harsh adjustment, I think Mac Jones's adjustment will be even harder. And I just don't think he projects to be a franchise quarterback in the next level. And I would not touch him in the first or second round. For me, he's a mid to late round 3 selection that you take in order to groom him to be an elite backup in this league, because I think that's what he is.
Yeah, I agree. You said it. I don't think that he's a starter in the NFL. I think, as a backup, he could come in. He's a guy you want as a backup. I think, similar to Jake Fromm last year, where we thought that, this is a guy that you want to be your backup quarterback. I think, Mac Jones is the same way. Obviously, I have him slightly above Kyle Trask. These are not official rankings, so, it's subject to change with more film study and all of that. But like you said, I think he really gets bailed out a lot by his receivers. And people say, "Oh, you can't knock him for the talent of his receivers." Yes, you can, because if he didn't have those receivers, he would not be putting up the numbers that he did. He would not have anywhere near the completions and the tape that he did. And good for him. He made the most of his situation, and that's one of the biggest things you can ask for from a quarterback is make the most of your situation. I just think that he doesn't have the ability to exceed his situation, which is what we see from the first three quarterbacks, and then Lance too with a proper coaching. I think if we have a one Pro Bowl wide receiver, and then we have two average starting NFL wide receivers. That's what the offense that Mac Jones is gonna. That's how he's gonna look in that offense. He's not gonna be great. He's not going to be awful, but he's not a guy that you want as a starter. He's a guy you want. He's got great preparation. He clearly backed up Tua for 2 years. He was ready when Tua got hurt to come in. So I think those show you the traits that you want to see in someone that you want as a backup. But I'm just worried that teams are going to jump on the bandwagon. Alabama won the national championship. Mac Jones had all these passing with all these completions. He helped make one of the best wide receivers in college football history, but that speaks to Devontae Smith more than it does to Mac Jones. And I'm just worried that people are going to get caught in that train, the hype train for Mac Jones. Like you said, I see him as a third-round pick, and I agree with most of the things you said. Is accuracy, is ball placement. The thing to me that puts him slightly ahead of Trask right now is I don't see him. Sure, his ball accuracy isn't the best. But I don't see him make blatantly stupid decisions. I think he's fairly smart with the ball. He can work on not throwing the ball while he's being sacked. His ball security there, but I think he's gonna find the open guy. If your wide receivers are gonna get open, he's gonna find them. He does progress through his reads, and I just think that if you have a really good offense, if you have a Super Bowl caliber offense, he's the guy you want as your backup, because if your starter goes down, he will be able to get the job done and win you the games you're supposed to win, and that's what you want as a backup quarterback.
Yeah, I know I'm not a big fan of player comparisons because I think they get really forced sometimes. But when I do just think of a really good one, I do want to share, and I know people love the player comps. For me, I see a lot of Case Keenum in Mac Jones. I think he's the ultimate backup, which is what Keenum is, because if you've got a team that's really well built with a really good supporting cast, and he needs to be forced into action, your team can still go far. And that's what Case Keenum is. He's not a franchise quarterback. He's not an every year starter, but he's the ultimate guy that you want to have if your starter goes down, to throw him in there, and so for your offense to really still be able to excel. And I think Case Keenum really wouldn't be able to do anything without much, and that's the same thing with Mac Jones. But in the right situation, as that spot starter, he can have some successful stretches in his career. I just don't think he's a career-long franchise quarterback. That's not who he is. So I see some Case Keenum and Mac Jones.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison just because of his skills, but then also his ability. Mac Jones still can perform in big games. You saw him do it in the college football playoffs. You saw him win the national championship. He's not afraid of the big stage, and you saw that with Case Keenum as well with the Minneapolis Miracle. So there's I think that's a great comparison. He's not going to get scared by the big stage. If your starting quarterback goes down in the playoffs and you need him to finish out a divisional game, I think he can do it. If he has the right supporting cast around him, I just don't think he's the guy that you want to say, okay, we're going to build a team around him. And he's going to be our starter for the next 10, 15 years. But yeah. Like you said, he's what you want in a backup, and I'd take him with, mid-late third-round pick if you're a team that is Super Bowl contender and you need a backup.
Yeah, I think, and to move on to Kyle Trask, I think he's a pretty similar player to Mac Jones, which is why I'm having difficulties on picking one over the other. Right now I'm leaning Trask, but that could change with more film study and as we go through the draft process. The thing with Trask, it's really that he has mediocre physical traits like Mac Jones does, and my knock on Trask is not really that he gets completely bailed out by an elite supporting cast, although he does get benefited by having a good supporting cast with Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts, two potential first rounders. But he doesn't have the mental flawlessness to make up for the mediocre physical traits. Sometimes you see him struggling to read underneath coverages. I think people like to say that he's a very good decision maker, but sometimes I do see him making a poor throw that puts the ball in danger. He has good ball placement generally, but when it's not good, while other quarterbacks may just miss the guy, very often it's put in danger and it's at risk of being an interception. So I think what keeps Trask above Jones for me is that he's more of a multi-year starter, and his supporting cast didn't quite as much bail him out. So he's more experienced, and the adjustment might not be quite as difficult. But at the end of the day, I think they're very comparable prospects in terms of how they project at the next level for me. I think they're both high-end backups, and similarly to Jones, I think Trask is definitely who you want as a backup, and you can turn him into a very good backup at that, because he usually does do the right thing. He'll get the ball to the players. If you've got a good supporting cast, he'll be able to make plays with them. He just doesn't have the elite physical traits or the elite mental flawlessness to make him a franchise quarterback in the next level for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, those flaws that you pointed out in Trask are why I have him as my sixth quarterback behind Jones. I think that Jones is a better decision maker than Trask. To me, that's what you want in a backup. You want him to be the best decision maker possible. And Jones isn't the best decision maker possible, but he's better than Trask. And to me, that one, along with, I think, neither of them are very mobile. I think Jones is a little bit more mobile. From what I saw on tape, he showed a slightly better ability to avoid pressure and run if that was the last option. So those two things are why I have Jones slightly ahead of Trask. Again, if a team takes Trask over Jones, I'm not going to say, "Oh, why'd you do that?" It's kind of preference. If you trust, like you said, Trask is a multi-year starter. So if that's what's more important to you in a backup, then go ahead, go for it. I can't blame you at all for that pick. They're going to have very similar grades. And like you said, mid to late third round grades from them.
Yeah, so to wrap up, we've got Trevor Lawrence at the top, Justin Fields next, Zach Wilson next, and we really see those three as surefire franchise quarterbacks. Then we have Trey Lance, an exciting project quarterback who, if you have him sit a year, he can really develop into a dynamic franchise quarterback too. And so that just makes this class so special with those four at the top. And then we think that Mac Jones and Kyle Trask really benefited from the situations they were in college and are more of the high-end backup type. And just before we close out, not to put you on the spot or anything, but do you think there's anybody outside these six quarterbacks who could really emerge into a starter in the league, or do you think this is really it, and we capped it at these six because there's really not much behind it?
I'm going to lean towards there's not really much behind it. I know both of us were high on Carson Strong, the quarterback from Nevada, but he is going back to school. I think that's a great decision for him. I think, like we said before, I think he has potential to be a first-round pick next year. But I don't really see too much else behind those six, and I think that's why we capped it at six. I think Ian Book can be a decent backup from Notre Dame.
I think the name that I would want to throw out is Davis Mills. I think that he's got good physical traits, good short and intermediate accuracy, but he does have some mechanical and decision making issues that he needs to work on. And again, I think he has the potential to be a high end backup. He's probably not he probably doesn't have the potential to be a franchise quarterback in this league. So for the franchise quarterbacks, it's really those top four. And then there's with Trask, Jones, and maybe somebody else like maybe Book or maybe Mills joining them. That would be the group after that who can be high end backups in this league, but not franchise quarterbacks in our opinion. So unless you have anything else to say, that wraps up our quarterback review for Boltec Scouting.
Yeah, I just have one last point to make, and that is just the observation of how much more important mobility is becoming for a starting quarterback. If you're not mobile, you're going to have struggles as a starting quarterback. I think, not to knock Joe Burrow at all. He's a great quarterback, but I think Joe Burrow's level of mobility is about the absolute minimum you could have to be a good starting quarterback and with star potential.
Especially because his accuracy and intangibles are elite. They're as good as they get. So that's what it takes to overcome that level of mobility in today's NFL. And so I just want to say that we're going to be pumping out the scouting reports on all of the these top 6 quarterbacks over the next 6 weeks. We're going to be posting one per week, starting with Justin Fields next Tuesday. So so tune in for that. And then in April, we're just gonna have a post that brings them all together and reveals these rankings and grades that we've already gone over in this episode, just to have that as reference. And so that's our coverage of the quarterback class. Of course, that we're just heading into this process. There's the whole combine and everything. A lot can come out on character, situation, medicals. So a lot. What?
Work ethic.
Yeah, work ethic. So a lot of stuff can come out, but right now this is how we view the quarterback class. So thank you for joining us today, and make sure to check out Bold Take Scouting on Instagram to see all those scouting reports come in the coming weeks.
And tune in next week for next week's podcast. We'll be pumping out one a week, and then maybe more as we get closer to draft season. Thanks for listening.